this bill, SB 54, I think is one of the most important bills we could pass, not just in California, but in our country, as we defend our state against a war on immigrants. And I have just 3 points I want to make. The first has to do with public safety. We heard from our colleague from San Jose, his perspective as a former criminal defense attorney about how this will jeopardize public safety. I speak having come from a different perspective as a former member of law enforcement, but I reach the same conclusion. I had hundreds of witnesses and victims who came from our immigrant communities, who may not have had documentation because Congress has failed to act to provide comprehensive immigration reform. And these are individuals who are highly concerned about whether they should be witnesses to a crime, whether they should be the reported victims of crimes. And if this law doesn't pass, we jeopardize public safety because those victims and those witnesses will not be able to speak up. The fact that we know from the Los Angeles police chief that we've seen in LA a drop of 25% of reports of sexual assault within the Latino community, just in the last few months, a 10% drop in domestic violence crimes being reported within that immigrant community. That's incredibly troubling, and I think all of us need to do what we can to ensure that public safety is protected. Second, there have been a number of suggestions around the legality of this, and I know some of our colleagues have wondered who got what legal opinion where, and where can we read them? Well, let me suggest this committee, the Assembly Committee on the Judiciary, has put out a great 15-page analysis of the constitutionality and the legality of this document. I would just request of my colleagues, who I guess have just left, that they read this document because it lays out what are the constitutional and legal principles upon which this is supported. And I would just suggest, as our colleague from Yuba City just said, his party spent a lot of time building the rights of states to have the laws that they have, and I think those are case laws. What good is for the goose is good for the gander. These are legal and constitutional theories that I think will very much support what we are doing here with the Values Act. The last thing I want to say is context is incredibly important. We have seen, not just from a presidential election where our immigrant communities were demonized, but we've seen in the first few months of this presidential administration 2 executive orders that have been held in multiple federal courts to be unconstitutional. We have a president who has proposed 10,000 new ICE agents to flood the streets of our country to go after our immigrant communities. And we know that immigration arrests have increased more than 40% already compared to recent years. When we're asked why is this important, at the end of the day, if I know that we have a presidential administration that is willing to cut up against and violate the Constitution in order to deport millions of individuals, I want to make sure that our hard-paid tax dollars at the state and local level are not used to deputize our neighbors, our public sector workers, our law enforcement officials who are busy doing a lot of things, to deputize them in Donald Trump's agenda to deport millions of Californians. I don't want our state to be sharing personal information with his deportation forces, and I certainly don't think that our schools, our hospitals, our courthouses, and libraries should be the site of future ICE raids. And to me, that is what this bill is about, and this is why I've been a proud co-author of this bill, and I do hope, because I know my city was invoked in the discussion by some of our colleagues, from the perspective of San Francisco, we know the Values Act is an act that will make our community safer, and this is why we need it. And with that, thank you, and I hope that this committee can move this forward quickly.